Somewhere inside Sobe Stadium, a tournament director is doing math he did not expect to be doing in August. Carl Hale looks at a ticket count for a third-round match and sees a number that belongs to a semifinal. Over 5,000 fans wanted a seat. The grandstand court, 2,800 capacity, was suddenly too small for the assignment, so they moved her to center court. That is not a scheduling decision. That is a market signal. Friday, August 7th, Alex Eala against Caty McNally. National Bank Open, Toronto, round of 32. I just kept my energy up and tried to play 1 point at a time. That was McNally. Hours before first ball, describing the only plan that made sense against a crowd that already belonged to someone else. She was not talking about a game plan for Eala's forehand. She was talking about surviving a building full of people who came for a coronation. If you were building a resume for the biggest upset of the North American hardcourt swing, you could not have engineered it better than the one McNally already had in her pocket. 2 days earlier, she had walked onto that same court and taken apart the reigning Wimbledon champion, Linda Noskova. Down 5-1 in the first set, 2 set points saved, then 12 of the final 14 games ripped away in front of a stunned tournament. It was her second career win over a top 10 opponent, her 22nd win of the season, a career high. The WTA's own account posted the clip with 3 words, "Now that's a comeback." So when Eala walked out to face her, she was not facing a name off a qualifying list. She was facing the player who had just ended a Grand Slam Champions tournament in the cruelest possible fashion, and she was facing her in front of a sold-out house that had shown up for a coronation, not a contest. Here is the sequence that got us here. Miami, 2025, Eala runs the table against 3 Grand Slam champions, and the tennis world takes its first real look. Then the injuries, the quiet stretches, the ranking that would not move the way the talent said it should. Then March 2026, a career-high ranking. Then August 3rd, Washington, the Mubadala City DC Open, her first WTA singles title. A straight sets demolition of a top 5 American that ended 6-4, 6-4 and sent her into the top 20 for the first time in her career. 4 days later, Toronto. The tournament did not wait to see if the form was real. They put her on center court against a player who had just beaten a major champion, and the building sold out anyway. That is not luck. That is a promoter betting the house on a 21-year-old, and the crowd cashing the bet before the first point was even played. Set 1 did not go the way a coronation is supposed to go. Eala took it 6-3, comfortable enough, the kind of set that makes a tournament director relax in his seat. Then McNally, the player who does not fold when a crowd turns against her, dragged the match into a second set and did to Eala what she had done to Noskova 2 days earlier. She took it 5-7. The building that had shown up to watch a victory lap was suddenly watching something closer to a horror movie. And then, in the middle of that second set, the story turned into something nobody in that stadium expected to be writing about afterward. Eala hurt her right foot, not a stumble. Not a wince she played through on adrenaline and forgot about later. A real injury, sustained mid-match, against an opponent who was already playing the best tennis of her comeback. The kind of moment that ends runs. The kind of moment where a 20-year-old with everything to lose and a title defense on her mind 2 weeks earlier finds out what she is actually made of. She did not retire. She did not fade. She walked into the third set and opened it 2-0. Read that back. Injured foot, sold-out hostile adjacent crowd cheering for her, sure, but also watching to see if the fairy tale was about to end in the ugliest way possible. An opponent who had just beaten a Wimbledon champion and clearly was not afraid of the moment. And Eala's answer was to come out of the changeover and win the first 2 games of the deciding set. She closed it out 6-4. Final score 6-3, 5-7, 6-4. 2 hours and 39 minutes. Look at the numbers underneath that scoreline and the match gets even more interesting. McNally actually won more total points across the match, 94-90. She landed more first serves. She converted break points at a better rate. By almost every efficiency metric a stat sheet can offer, this was closer to a coin flip than the final score suggests. Eala did not win this match by outclassing Caty McNally. She won it by finding the 2 or 3 points at 2-0 in the third, at match point in the 9th game. That actually mattered, while carrying an injury that would have given most players in that draw a built-in excuse to shut it down. That is not the profile of a hot streak. That is the profile of a competitor. Now walk back to that quote from before first ball, 1 point at a time. McNally said that about her own approach to the match. She had no idea she was also describing exactly what it would take to actually beat the player across the net. She played some of the best tennis of her comeback season on the same court where she had ended a major champions tournament 48 hours earlier, and she still walked away with a loss on the scoreboard. because the other side of the net had a 20-year-old who does not know how to stop playing just because her body is telling her to. If you are scoring at home, that is Eala's second win over a player who had just beaten a Grand Slam champion in the same tournament in less than a week. Miami had 3 Slam champions in a row. Toronto just gave her a live demonstration that the form from Washington was not a one-week accident. And here is where it gets uncomfortable for the rest of the draw. Eala's next opponent in the round of 16 is Belinda Bencic, a former Olympic gold medalist and a player who does not blink against big names. That is not a gimme. That is the tournament testing whether Washington and Toronto were the start of something or the ceiling of something. Nobody in that locker room believes it is the ceiling anymore. Not after what they just watched on an injured foot in front of 5,000 extra fans who were never supposed to fit in that building in the first place. There is a smaller story buried inside the bigger one, and it says almost as much. Eala and Venus Williams, paired together in doubles, lost their first match of the tournament to Lyudmila Samsonova and Miyu Kato, 4-6, 3-6. A 20-year-old sharing a doubles court with a 7-time Grand Slam singles champion. In the same week, she is carrying a sold-out singles draw on an injured foot. That is not a schedule. That is a young player being handed every version of pressure a tour can invent, all in the same 72 hours, and choosing to walk toward the hardest version of it in singles instead of protecting her body for an easier week. Rewind exactly 1 year from this tournament and the picture gets sharper. July 31st, 2025, Eala withdrew from this same North American swing with a shoulder injury after an early exit in Montreal. She watched that stretch of the season from the sidelines while her ranking sat still and her season looked like it might quietly unravel. No manifesto, no comeback documentary, just rehab, and a March 2026 career-high ranking that nobody outside her camp was talking about yet. 12 months later, she is walking onto a sold-out center court on an injured foot and finding a way to win anyway. The calendar did not need her to explain the journey. It just needed her to show up in Toronto and answer the only question that actually mattered. Was Washington real? Here is the uncomfortable math for everyone left in that draw. McNally played arguably the best tennis of her season and still lost. Noskova, the reigning Wimbledon champion, did not even make it past round 2, and the player who beat both storylines in the same week is carrying a foot injury into a round of 16 match against an Olympic gold medalist, with a sold-out crowd now expecting it every single time she steps on court. That is not pressure building slowly. That is pressure arriving all at once and a 20-year-old deciding to play through it instead of around it. So here's the question worth sitting with before the round of 16 draw goes live. Does an injured foot catch up to Eala against a player as complete as Bencic? Or does Toronto just watch the same script from Washington play out one more time on a bigger stage in front of a crowd that keeps outgrowing the court they put her on? Drop your prediction before that match starts. Subscribe if you want the Bencic breakdown, the injury update, and the rest of this Toronto run covered point by point the moment it moves. We are following this one all the way to the final.